The narrative of the United States unfolds here, decade by decade, 1770s. It all initiated here, in a way. The cultural foundation for the United States had been forming for centuries, beginning with the arrival of the first British settlers. What commenced as small groups of struggling pioneers evolved into 13 prosperous colonies, frustrated colonies weary of British taxation. The king ignored their pleas for change, leaving them with one option: declare independence. On July 4, 1776, that's precisely what they accomplished. Naturally, the British were not going to accept this lightly. The initial shots had already been fired in 1775, but now the colonies were officially rebelling. They faced the full force of the British Empire, outgunned and outmatched, with little hope of success. Unless you consult General George Washington and his forces, who sustained the fight far longer than anticipated long enough to carry us into the 1780s. As it became evident that American troops were holding their ground longer than expected, interest in the conflict surged. The French, long-standing adversaries of Britain, were especially intrigued, and some even joined the Continental Army. The war continued, but the unexpected American triumph at the Battle of Yorktown paved the way for an American victory. By September 1783, Britain was ready to part ways with this troublesome colony, leading to a treaty signing. The United States of America officially emerged as an independent nation. Now came the challenge of governance. The initial attempt at a governing system, the Articles of Confederation, proved chaotic. It treated the 13 colonies as separate entities with only a loose government to unify them. Implemented in 1781, a series of uprisings and tax disputes revealed its inadequacies. Thus, a constitutional convention was convened, gathering every significant thinker and leader to negotiate details. This was no simple task. Southern states' insistence on preserving slavery nearly derailed discussions entirely. Ultimately, approval was granted, leading to the selection of the first President of the United States. It was no surprise when war hero George Washington won election without opposition. However, Washington faced challenges during his presidency in the 1790s. He aimed to govern as a nonpartisan leader, opposing political parties' existence. Yet history had different plans. His close ally Alexander Hamilton shared Federalist views, but often advocated for stricter measures, such as when Washington quelled a rebellion by Western settlers against liquor taxes. Hamilton initially proposed executing insurrectionists, but Washington vetoed it. Suppressing the rebellion demonstrated that the federal government could assert its authority. Vermont, Kentucky, and Tennessee entered the Union, showcasing a robust new nation. However, dissent was brewing. While Washington's policies were popular, founding fathers Thomas Jefferson and James Madison opposed increasing governmental power. They accused Federalists of steering toward monarchy and established their own Democratic-Republican Party. Although Washington faced no opposition in 1792's election, he shocked everyone by announcing his retirement and establishing a precedent against serving more than 2 terms. America prepared for its first competitive election as Washington's close advisor and Vice President John Adams triumphed over Jefferson. This marked a complex turning point. Tensions escalated with France amidst a peculiar quasi-war in the Caribbean, while hostilities persisted with Britain and conflicts arose with various Native American groups. Adams lacked Washington's popularity and sought to bolster his political standing through the Alien and Sedition Act's measures that restricted U.S. citizenship and made criticizing the government illegal. Intended to weaken Democratic Republicans, these acts backfired by energizing opposition. In 1800's election, Thomas Jefferson defeated Adams amidst anxious anticipation regarding whether Adams would relinquish power peacefully. He did, and set a standard, followed by future presidents, mostly. A new president led a nascent nation into the 1800s. The first governmental transition in the United States brought unforeseen consequences. For instance, at this point, the U.S. was still just a small fraction of its eventual size. This changed dramatically in 1803 when Jefferson orchestrated the Louisiana Purchase from post-Revolution France, adding vast territories and nearly doubling national size, propelling them toward becoming a significant global player. Jefferson also sought to ease tensions with Britain and France through an all-encompassing trade embargo. Was this isolationist era about to commence? The embargo proved deeply unpopular and detrimental to the economy. However, it wasn't the only dramatic event of this decade. Two founding fathers engaged in conflict when Vice President Aaron Burr fatally shot Alexander Hamilton in a duel. This period also saw constitutional changes, allowing presidents to select their own vice presidents rather than pairing with runners-up. Thus, Burr was succeeded by George Clinton during Jefferson's successful re-election campaign. Jefferson's presidency proved to be highly impactful. This era saw Lewis and Clark embark on their expedition, the invention of the steamboat, and the end of the slave trade with Africa. While many states, like New Jersey, began abolishing slavery, Jefferson's successful term led to his protege, James Madison, being elected in 1808. Madison's presidency began with a calm period but soon faced significant challenges. In the 1810s, George Clinton remained as Madison's vice president until his death in 1812, coinciding with escalating tensions over American expansion, British support for Native American uprisings, and trade disputes. These issues culminated in the War of 1812. The U.S. faced naval blockades and conflicts with British Canada, including the burning of Washington, D.C. in 1814. However, under General Andrew Jackson's leadership, Americans turned the tide, capturing Florida, and eventually signing a peace treaty. Madison's administration also saw the addition of Louisiana and Indiana as states. His ally James Monroe succeeded him in 1816, continuing the Democratic-Republican dominance by adding Mississippi, Alabama, and Illinois to the Union. The Supreme Court began asserting federal authority over state laws during this time. Monroe is remembered as a successful president for implementing the Monroe Doctrine against European colonialism in the Western Hemisphere. However, his legacy became complicated by the contentious election that followed. Andrew Jackson emerged as a popular candidate, but lost to John Quincy Adams due to a lack of majority votes in a four-way race. Adams's presidency was marred by personal tragedy and political controversy. Jackson's term began with further turmoil following his wife's death. He aggressively pursued policies leading to the removal of Native Americans from their lands amid rising tensions over slavery. The 1830s were marked by conflict as northern states outlawed slavery, while Nat Turner led a revolt against it. The Supreme Court struck down some of Jackson's Native American policies, which he ignored as he continued forced removals actions now viewed as genocidal. In 1832, South Carolina nullified a federal tariff, leading to a standoff that ended with Calhoun resigning as vice president. Martin Van Buren took over as vice president and later became president after Jackson's re-election. His administration faced challenges like the Panic of 1837 and continued conflicts over Native American removal, including the tragic Trail of Tears. The 1840s began with William Henry Harrison's presidency, marked by his frail health. He died just a month after taking office. John Tyler assumed the presidency, but struggled politically and was not renominated by his party. James K. Polk then took office, greatly expanding U.S. territory through state admissions and war with Mexico, following Texas's annexation. The slavery debate intensified with Dred Scott's lawsuit for freedom, leading to a Supreme Court ruling denying rights to black individuals. The 1850s were defined by escalating tensions over slavery. Taylor died shortly after taking office and was succeeded by Millard Fillmore. The Compromise of 1850 attempted to ease conflict, but failed amid violent clashes in Kansas and brutal incidents like Charles Sumner's assault in Congress. Pierce's presidency saw further deterioration of national unity as Buchanan took office during economic struggles, while John Brown led violent anti-slavery actions. The nation stood on the brink of civil war as divisions deepened over slavery and state rights. Amidst the chaos, a new leader emerged. The anti-slavery movement found its champion in the charismatic Republican candidate Abraham Lincoln, who gained prominence through debates with moderate Stephen Douglas. As the Republicans prepared for the 1860 election, Lincoln became their chosen candidate. In a tumultuous four-way race, which included Douglas and Buchanan's Vice President John Breckinridge, Lincoln emerged victorious. Fearing that Lincoln would threaten their way of life, Southern states began plans to secede, leaving Buchanan powerless as the nation unraveled. By the time Lincoln took office, turmoil was rampant. Most Southern states, starting with South Carolina and including Texas, voted to secede and elected Jefferson Davis as their president. An attempt to secure slavery in the U.S. Constitution failed, and soon after Lincoln's inauguration, Confederate forces attacked a U.S. Army base, marking the official start of the Civil War. The Confederacy proved formidable, even breaching Union territory and leading to fierce battles in Pennsylvania, while the nation celebrated the 100th anniversary of the U.S. Constitution. Yet, the final decade of the 19th century would present even more challenges. In the 1890s, reform took center stage with the passage of the Sherman Antitrust Act and the establishment of the largest suffrage organization led by women advocating for voting rights. Idaho and Wyoming became the latest states to join the Union, and Yosemite National Park was established. However, some issues remained unchanged. The treatment of Native Americans continued to be appalling. Nearly 300 Dakota individuals were killed in what became known as the Wounded Knee Massacre. The General Electric Company was founded, and labor disputes escalated, culminating in a massive lockout and strike among steelworkers. While Harrison was generally regarded as a competent president, his controversial election still loomed over him. In 1892, Grover Cleveland made history by running for a non-consecutive second term. With a split vote due to a new populist party gaining traction in western states, he easily defeated Benjamin Harrison. He became the only president to return after losing re-election. Cleveland returned to office amid another economic depression that incited more militant labor actions. The simmering issue of segregation in the South erupted when the Supreme Court ruled in Plessy v. Ferguson that separate but equal was constitutional. Utah gained statehood, Henry Ford built his first automobile, and the Alaskan gold rush commenced. Once again, it was time for a shift in leadership. Adhering to an unofficial two-term limit, even if non-consecutive, Cleveland was succeeded by Republican William McKinley, who triumphed over fiery populist Democrat William Jennings Bryan in 1896. McKinley's presidency quickly became dominated by foreign affairs when the U.S. Marine exploded in Havana Harbor, killing 268 sailors. This disaster marked one of the worst incidents in U.S. naval history and led to war with Spain. The conflict arose amidst Cuba's ongoing struggle for independence from Spanish rule, which the U.S. blamed on Spain. The war lasted only 10 weeks and concluded with a treaty that ceded several Spanish territories, including Puerto Rico and the Philippines, to the United States. McKinley also annexed Hawaii and took control of American Samoa, establishing himself as one of the most imperialist presidents up to that point. As the 20th century approached, McKinley faced personal loss with Vice President Hobart's death and selected controversial New York Governor Theodore Roosevelt, a progressive figure, as his new running mate. Party leaders aimed to sideline Roosevelt, a popular hero from the Spanish-American War. Together, this unlikely pair easily defeated Bryan for a second time and took office with promising prospects for the new century. McKinley emerged victorious while keeping Roosevelt contained in a role with limited power. However, uncertainty loomed over what might unfold next. What are your thoughts on the actions of our country's founding fathers? Please share your insights in the comments below. I look forward to seeing you in our next video. Thank you.